And next up is our very own Ehab Roufail, a core member of the Code UK team. He has researched and read extensively in Christian apologetics, particularly in the cosmological argument for the existence of God. You can check out his talks and other videos on our YouTube channel. But today, Ehab will be talking to us about the archaeological evidence for the Bible. So over to you.
Thanks, Farah. Are we going to jump straight in because of time? Is that our understanding? I'll jump straight in. I'll take your lead, Farah.
Thank you.
So in this section, we're going to look through the Bible, and especially in the British Museum. One of my favourite characters growing up, forgive me, Your Grace, was Indiana Jones, and the films made around him and his exploration of archaeological evidence. So we're going to do an Indiana Jones of the British Museum. Can you all see my screen that's on the left? Which screen can you see?
We see your presentation, Ehab.
Yeah.
Cool. Biblical validation tour, is that the one?
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. So if I go to the next slide, I just want to show you this in action. We're going to use Google, the Google Maps, who have mapped out the different floors in the British Museum. The floors that we're going to explore together are floor 0 and floor 3. But let me go back. I've recorded some of this in case we have technical problems. So we'll start the video that way. So we'll start off by stepping into the British Museum. Okay. So we'll start off by stepping into the British Museum via a virtual tour with Google Street View. Google Street View starts us off right next to the Rosetta Stone here on the right, with a reading room, I think, on our left. And if we walk all the way down past the Egyptian exhibits, all the way to almost the end of this corridor, we'll get to the Neo-Assyrian period, which I want us to start off with. So we're going to be looking at this area here. If I just position us, first we'll look at the stele of Shalmaneser III. Stele is a large stone monument, usually put up by kings to show off their exploits, and it's got inscriptions all the way through that you might not be able to see. Let's see if we can. So here you've got the inscriptions that we're going to look at of the stele, and we're also going to look at this black obelisk that I want us to focus on the kneeling figure that I've just gone past of someone, a notable king, paying homage to Shalmaneser III. And if I zoom in, you'll be able to see that leaning figure. And if we turn round this last area, we're going to talk about this door here. Thank you. So what we said we'd look at, the first stele that we look at, the first large object, in 1 Kings 22 verse 1, we have an intriguing quote that for 3 years there was no war between Aram and Israel. So what we're doing here in this section is looking at archaeological evidence that supports the Bible's accuracy, even to quoting certain events, and seeing if they are married up in archaeological finds. So can historical evidence shed light on what happened in those 3 years? So Shalmaneser III, king of Assyria, between 859 and 824, according to the cuneiform script that's in this stele at the bottom. And that stele could be stone or wooden. In this case, it's stone. Shalmaneser III attacked King Erhulini of Hamath, whom in defense requested the aid of 11 local rulers, which included King Ahan and Ben-Hadad. this event not only explains why there was no war for 3 years between Aram and Israel, but also gives a historical corroboration of the biblical reign of King Ahab. So when it states in 1 Kings 22:1 that there was no war for 3 years, that King Ahab had not entered into war between Aram and Israel, it's because King Shalmaneser III had attacked, and an alliance was there to support and to defend against Shalmaneser. In 2 Kings chapters 9 and 10, remember we looked at the stele and we showed this leaning person, this leaning king. The text under it in cuneiform, in 2 Kings, it says that the prophet Elijah sends a man to anoint Jehu as king over Israel and urges him to eradicate the cult of Baal. Jehu goes and proceeds to kill all the descendants of King Ahab, kills Jezebel, and takes over the northern kingdoms. Can this be corroborated in history? Well, in this black obelisk, we see that Shalmaneser III, King Jehu, is talked about in the cuneiform as giving obeisance or giving honor or homage to Shalmaneser III. So King Jehu of Israel hastens to affirm his loyalty to the Assyrian king soon after he took over the house of Ahab. And the inscription reads, Jehu, son of Humri, or son of Umri. And we could look into detail on that, but we won't. The third bit that we looked at is this big door, which is called the Doors of the Bronze Gates of Balawat. And it dates back to the mid-9th century BC, between 930 and 608 BC. Shalmaneser III, like most monarchs before him, wanted to leave a physical legacy, lasting, of what he did. So he built the city of Balawat to be a summer palace. This is in the British Museum. You have a full replica of one of the Balawat gates. The bronze bands are original, and they're shown on the left in a glass container in the British Museum. And embossed on the bronze bands are the warfare scenes of the campaigns of Shalmaneser III. On the second top rung, right at the top here, the display, we see men being led by the hands, tied behind their backs. I've shown a zoomed in picture of it. Prisoners from Hamath or Syria, and the cuneiform underneath this brass says that they mention, and it mentions Erhulini by name, even though he was not himself captured. So the gates of Balawat provide yet more authentication of the events of 1 Kings 22 and of 2 Kings 9 and 10. We're going to get some intriguing finds, but that's just a first introduction. Let's see what else.
So if we carry on the tour, we left you at the bronze gates of Balawat. If we now proceed down this long corridor, and the reason we're doing this is because the next 5 kings of Assyria had little to do with the Israelites, and so are not important to our tour. We now jump to the mid-8th century BC, and here we come across an important king. His name is Tiglath-Pileser, and he conquered the northern kingdoms of Assyria. So he's depicted here in this relief on the right, and on the left is probably his son Sennacherib, and we're going to look at both of those kings in a second. So he conquered Israel, set up a puppet king named Menahem. He took all the people, the Israelites, out of there, made them his slaves, and then populated all of Israel with Assyrians. And that's where sort of the hatred of the area of Samaria comes from. We're going to come to this area here. So we're going to look at Sennacherib. We're going to understand a bit more about him, because he did what his father didn't do. He attacked the southern kingdom of Judah, which was under the righteous king Hezekiah at the time. And we're going to look at what's in here and the evidences that gives us. Unfortunately, there's a prism missing
here that used to be here, and I can't find it, but I'll bring that up in the discussion. But that's that next bit. See you soon.
So at this point, I just want to ask Ferdi and Helena, is it clear where I'm going with this? Are there any questions that you would have as to how this is progressing? So we're looking at biblical supporting evidence from archaeological finds. Is that straightforward?
Yes, fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ferdi. Thanks, Helena, for your thumbs up. So as we said, the next 5 kings of Assyria had little to do with the Israelites, and so we're not looking at those to support biblical quotes. But Tiglath-Pileser, who I showed you, attacked the Israelites twice. He conquered Israel and set up puppet kings, and we talked about that. And historians, and if we look at a quote from 2 Kings 15:19, historians don't like this quote, and I'll explain at the time why they didn't. Pul, king of Assyria, came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him to strengthen the kingdom under his control. Who is Pul? Historians didn't know a Pul. They knew Tiglath-Pileser, and so they thought the Bible was inaccurate to be able to quote Tiglath-Pileser by the name of Pul. It was only until this mural that was found, and it's in the British Museum, and we've just passed it, was discovered, which refers, with a chariot and with cuneiform underneath it, it refers to Tiglath-Pileser III as Pul, which is his AKA in his home countries of Assyria. So he was known as Pul. The Bible, again, as you scratch deeper, has been shown to be even more accurate than historians thought at the time. So as we continue this, let's look at what he does. So we mentioned that Tiglath-Pileser took over the northern kingdoms and left it for his son Sennacherib. Sennacherib then attacks the southern kingdoms, does what his father couldn't do. This is Sennacherib and his son Sargon. So the man depicted on the, it's opposite to what we saw there, is Sennacherib on the left and his son on the right, that then takes up the reign. Sennacherib on the right, who takes up the reign of his father Sargon II. So in 2 Kings chapter 18 verses 13 to 15, it says, "And in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lakshish, saying, I have done wrong. Turn away from me. Whatever you impose on me, I will pay. And the king of Assyria assessed Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house." In fact, the room that we left you in just now was of the Battle of Lakshish, which is mentioned here in 2 Kings chapter 18. Remember, we looked at this glass cabinet that's supposed to have this hexagonal cuneiform that we're very interested in. It's been moved. So as archaeologists dug through the layers of this battle in Lakshish that's mentioned in 2 Kings, they found round stone slings, arrowheads, bone and metal that are on display here. They also found the Taylor prism. This prism talks about Sennacherib's account of his own battles, including Lakshish and his battle against Jerusalem. And it directly parallels the biblical account in 7 areas. It says Hezekiah rebelled against Sennacherib. Number 2, that the fortified towns of Judah fell, that Lakshish also fell. It was the second last city to fall before Jerusalem. Hezekiah was shut up in Jerusalem, that he paid 30 talents of gold. Remember, we just read that in the account from 2 Kings in the Bible. And that Jerusalem itself did not fall. The Assyrian army left without firing a single arrow at Jerusalem. Why? You see, the Bible explains why, but the historical record, including the prism, gives no help. So let's look at that. So according to 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 9, and Isaiah 37, verse 9,
Now Sennacherib received a report that Tirhakah, the king of Cush, was marching out to fight against him. So he again sent messages to Hezekiah with this word. So Sennacherib had to leave his attack of Jerusalem, the last major city of King Hezekiah, and he had to run back and defend his hometown. And historians have puzzled over who Tirhakah was for so long, because there was no documentary evidence for such a king, let alone such a king of Cush. Now, Cush is Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. That was the Cushite Empire. But there's no, up until then, there was no evidence of who Tirhakah was. And we're going to see later evidence of this in the British Museum itself. The murals that we showed in the room of Lakshish that had the prism, it's written in cuneiform and it mentions King Hezekiah by name in those murals, again backing up the Bible evidence. This mural was found in the palace of Nineveh and says that Sennacherib returned to Jerusalem a second time with 200,000 warriors this time to defeat Hezekiah and conquer Jerusalem. And that exactly parallels what's in the Bible. The base of the mural tells us that he returned without shooting a single arrow, and there is no reference to a king defeated or a city destroyed or loot gained. How would a historian explain this? So I want to ask any one of the panelists, in our Bible, what do we know happened when Sennacherib attacked Jerusalem for the second time? Anyone?
His army was completely wiped out
By
an angel.
By an angel. So that's the only historical evidence that we have is in the Bible. So according to the Babylonian Chronicles, Sennacherib, when he went back home, in the Chronicles of Sennacherib himself, he was killed by his two sons. Why would sons kill a king at the height of his power who just defeated an attacking king called Tirhakah? And the reason is, in the Bible, 2 Kings chapter 19 is fairly brilliantly said. That night, the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. Remember, we were just told in the cuneiform, non-biblical evidence, on a wall from a mural in the city of Nineveh that Sennacherib took 200,000. 185,000 of those soldiers were immediately wiped out by an angel of the Lord. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. And the account is that his sons were so embarrassed that they had no choice but to kill their own father, because what can you say? So what happened to those 185,000? What do you mean they were killed? By whom? By what? So historians are faced with a dilemma at this point, either to believe the biblical account, which provides the missing details, or to be satisfied that there is no explanation for why his two sons killed him on his return. Let's move on. So I left you in this room that we said was the mural of the Battle of Lakshish, which was the second attack that Sennacherib did. Let's see where we go next.
Hi, so in the next bit, I want to take you back. If you remember, Sennacherib in his first attack of Jerusalem had to return to Nineveh because a king referred to in the Bible as Tirhakah was attacking his capital. Well, Tirhakah, it was viewed by historians that the Bible had got something wrong, that because there was no historical evidence of a ruler, let alone a ruler of Cush, which is Ethiopia and Nubia and Egypt at the time, having been that strong as to attack Babylon. Well, in this statue here, which is called the statue of Ammon, it wasn't until the hieroglyphics were deciphered, the inscription was deciphered at the bottom here, that we find the name Tirhakah. So
Tarharka was referenced by name, archaeological evidence. It wasn't until the 20th century that again the Bible was proved to be accurate. Tarharka was a Cushite leader, and we'll touch on that in the next few slides. And then I want us to journey to look at the fall of Nineveh. Those of us that are so the fall of Nineveh is prophesied in the Bible, in the book of Nahum, and throughout the palace in Babylon were these murals, and we're going to look at the prophecy of the destruction of Nineveh by the prophet Nahum, where he prophesied that not only would Nineveh fall with fire, but would also fall because of a flood and drowning, which is very strange for fire and flood to happen. Well, we're going to look at evidence of that. In this mural, you've got burnt areas suggesting fire damage. We're going to look at written evidence for the fall of Nineveh that shows fire and flood were indeed involved. Thank you.
So let's look at this. We mentioned that the statue of Ammon was deciphered, and they found a reference to Tarharka, the Cushite ruler, who in the Bible attacked King Sennacherib, and Sennacherib had to flee back and leave the siege of Jerusalem. It was a serious threat, and the Bible puts it as such, and it wasn't until later on in the 20th century that name Tarharka was discovered. In fact, there's a story that in Southampton University, at the basement where they put up all their bikes when they came in for their studies, that they were leaning against a statue, a black obelisk statue, and it wasn't until it was translated that they found that that was a statue of King Tarharka. But that's an aside, because it's not at the British Museum, but it's a funny story nevertheless. So what about the destruction of Nineveh? Around 615 BC, the prophet Nahum in the Bible, chapter 1, 8 to 10, chapter 3, verses 13 to 15, says this, that it will be destroyed by fire and water because of their apostasy. So in verse 8, but with an overflowing flood, he will make an utter end of its place, and darkness will pursue his enemies. What do you conspire against the Lord? He will make an utter end of it. Affliction will not rise up a second time. For while tangled like thorns, and while drunken like drunkards, they shall be devoured like stubble fully dried. A reference to fire. And in chapter 3, verse 13 to 15, surely your people in your midst are women, the gates of your land are wide open for your enemies. Fire shall devour the bars of your gates. Draw your water for the siege. Fortify your strongholds. Go into the clay and tread the mortar. Make strong the brick kiln. There the fire will devour you. The sword will cut you off. It will eat you like a locust. Make yourself many like the locust. Make yourself many like the swarming locust. So the prophet Nahum prophesies much earlier of the destruction of Nineveh. Can this be shown to have happened in Nineveh? The murals that we just looked at in the room show that Nineveh has got fire damage in the murals themselves, and that shows evidence of fire damage. In the Babylonian Chronicle, which is this tablet here on the bottom right of the screen, we find documentary evidence supporting the events of 612, 615 BC, the destruction of Nineveh. The Babylonians destroyed Nineveh first by setting the palace. It's in this cuneiform written down on the tablet. It says the Babylonians destroyed Nineveh first by setting the palace on fire, the Assyrian palace on fire, and then flooding it by opening the gates of the Kosher River. So in this account, we have both physical and documentary evidence for the fulfillment of the Nahum's prophecy that Nineveh would be destroyed by fire and flood. Quite amazing, really, really amazing. So we've looked at the sort of Babylonian Assyrian period. We're going to jump back to look at the patriarchal period. Now, what I'm showing you here is part of a tour that I went on with Dr. J. Smith, that Dr. Anthony McCroy referenced as a common friend between us. Dr. J. Smith took us around the British Museum about 15, 20 years ago. Unfortunately, he's gone to the States now. We'll be coming back in August for a brief visit. But this was a
an amazing tour where he took us through the items that I'm going through now. This is things that he's put together. I've only tried to remember and piecemeal what he did back then. So the accuracy of the Genesis account of creation has been a topic of great debate among historians for years. Since we don't have the original documents, many historians believe that Genesis was written in the 6th century before Christ and redacted back to the time of Moses, i.e. set back as if pretending it was in the 6th century, back to the time of Moses. So the task for us is to determine if the biblical account accurately depicts the events of the time of the patriarchal period, and later to show that these were eyewitness accounts, including Abraham, Moses, and David from the 1900s BC, 1400 BC, and David about 1000 BC. For instance, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were not mentioned in sources other than the Bible, and up until the mid-20th century, that was viewed as a biblical myth by historians. There was no evidence of Sodom and Gomorrah. There was very little evidence of David, and people had said that that was a biblical myth. The prophet David himself. Let's look at what we find. Even the city of Ur, Abraham's origin, had little to no documentation. The Hittites, the Horites, the two civilizations with no physical evidence. All of these cities, cultures, people that are mentioned in the patriarchal period in biblical times are deemed legendary in history by historians until recently. So what happened? So a strong case for extra biblical corroboration of the patriarchal period is found in 4 sets of tablets, which have recently been found and translated. They demonstrate that the biblical account is indeed historical and reliable. These are the Maori Tablets, the Newsie Tablets, the Ebla, and the Ammon. And we're going to look at those now. I stopped going around the British Museum because some of these are not exhibited anymore directly at the British Museum. They are not on display, but if you search the British Museum website, you see these images with the rough sizes. So first, the Maori Tablets. They date back to Euphrates between 2800 and 760 BC. So at the time that the patriarchal period touches on, they were written, they were found in Ur, near Kirkuk, northern Iraq. So we have here the city of Ur where Abraham left in obedience. They mention King Arioch or Arioch of Genesis 14 and list towns of Nahor and Haran, again from Genesis 24:10, as well as the names Benjamin and a strange people known as Hapiru, meaning Hebrew. Wow. For me, these tablets, dated around the same time as the patriarchal period, mirror the account in the book of Genesis of those items. The Newsie Tablets, the second set of tablets we're going to look on, date back to Iraq between 1450 and 1350 BC. And these speak about a number of customs of the Hurrians or the biblical Horites. Now we have the Horites appearing, which we find paralleled in the Pentateuch. Customs are mentioned in these tablets that parallel the Abrahamic account, such as a barren wife giving a handmaid to her husband. These are in the accounts as a possible thing that could be done. That's exactly what happened to Hagar in Genesis 16:2. That a bride could be chosen for the son by the father. We see that Rebecca is chosen in Genesis 24, verse 3-4. That a dowry is to be paid by the father-in-law. In Jacob, Genesis 29:18, work done to pay a dowry. Jacob ends up working several years for his love, and then for her sister, and then his love. The unchanging oral will of a father. In Genesis 27, Isaac asks that his bones be taken back to the land of promise, and Joseph mentions that he has to take back his father Isaac, according to what the father had requested. The father giving his daughter a slave girl, as in what happened with Leah and Rachel there, were assigned slave girls in Genesis 29. The sentence of death for stealing cult gods, again in what happened with Jacob in Genesis 31. A man calling his wife sister, as Abraham did, and Isaac after him in Genesis 12, Genesis 20, and Genesis 26. These are all mentioned as cultural norms at the time, but only for that time. They no longer existed after 1300 BC. Therefore, how could someone writing in the 6th century have known so accurately what was happening in the 19th century BC through to the 14th? It suggests that the author was living during that period. This is only the second set of tablets. The third set of tablets, the Ebla tablets from Syria, 2300 BC. Historians have doubted the existence of Sodom and Gomorrah, as I mentioned earlier, and as there was no documentation of these cities. The great historian Herodotus from the 5th century BC never mentioned them. So if he didn't mention them, maybe they never existed. In 1975, archaeologists were digging at Tel Manvich. As they came to the 2300 BC level, they came to the city of Ebla, and we can describe how historical finds are found in big mounds, and at each level of these mounds, it meant you find a certain time in history. History builds itself mound on mound. At the 2300 level, they found the city of Ebla. In one room at the city of Ebla level, they found 17,000 tablets. One of the tablets, a trading document, mentions the following 5 cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar, in exactly the same order as they're mentioned in the book of Genesis, chapter 14, verse 8. Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. Same 5 cities, mentioned in the same order, meaning that this was a trading route that was probably taken. And it directly supports something that you couldn't possibly know unless you lived in that time, because Sodom and Gomorrah were later destroyed. So this shows that Sodom and Gomorrah are not only historical, but the sequence used also contains that their geographical location, the plains, is a trade route. How could someone writing in the 6th century BC know this, especially as Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed? It's this kind of historical accuracy that gives us increasingly greater confidence in the scriptures. The Maori Tablets, the last of the set of tablets that we're going to look at, date from Egypt, 1300, 1394 BC. So around 1887 AD, hundreds of ancient letters were discovered in Tel Amarna in Egypt. These letters were written on clay tablets, as shown, and sent from Palestine to 2 pharaohs, Amenhotep III, Amenhotep IV, who is Akhenaten. The governor of Jerusalem wrote several of these letters himself, appealing for help. This is the same period when Joshua and the children of Israel were moving into Palestine. No wonder the governor of Jerusalem was appealing for help. He was being attacked. The letters refer to the hostilities of the people named the Hapiru, or the Hebrews, who were attacking the cities in Palestine. It's exactly Joshua 12, 9-24, refers to the destruction of 31 city-states by the Israelites, bringing an end to the independent states. This is confirmed in the situation found in these Amarna tablets. So the Bible is accurate even dating back to Genesis, back to Joshua, and it's been found to be accurate with historical finds that have been discovered as we speak. Remember, I mentioned the Ur of the Chaldeans, when Abraham left in faith, obeyed God. He didn't know where he was going, but he left there. That was being doubted until the British Museum found, archaeologists found this and various other finds, like trinkets and tablets and a picture of a ziggurat from Ur. That very same city, Abraham left in 1900 BC, when by faith he obeyed, mentioned in Genesis 12 and in Hebrews 11, is shown here in these tablets and these findings, in a whole room that's on the 3rd floor in the British Museum now, if we explore it. Pretty amazing. And I wish I could take you there, but because of COVID and because we can't journey in a conference throughout the library except by the virtue of Google, that isn't possible. So what about creation and flood? And it's sometimes being pointed out to Christians that let me just move that, isn't Christianity just borrowing from events that are written in the Gilgamesh epic and various other epics? Well, the tablets of both the Epic of Creation and the Flood are taken from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Again, in the British Museum, they're out on display. Some believe these tablets were the source for the Genesis account of the creation and flood. The biblical account, though, is not a replica of the Epic of Gilgamesh, despite the similarities. Historians have assumed that the biblical Genesis account of creation and that the Garden of Eden were written down too late to be the original story, due to the earliest complete Hebrew text dated only as far back as 600 BC, if that, and much newer, in fact, as we heard in the talk by Dr. Anthony. This Atrahasis tablet we're going to look at now as well. This Atrahasis tablet is a tablet that dates earlier than the Gilgamesh epic that I mentioned. Okay, so let me go in. The Atrahasis tablet found in the room with the displays from the city of Ur. So it's found in the city of Ur. It dated back over 1,000 years older than the Gilgamesh epic, and was discovered, and it recounts a similar flood account, yet is over 1,000 years older than the Gilgamesh epic. So it can't be that the Gilgamesh epic was a source of the Genesis account, because there's a tablet here that goes older and yet relates a very similar occurrence. This suggests that this could be an even earlier source, yet the story has not changed in over 1,000 years. Additionally, over 200 flood accounts exist in cultures around the world, suggesting excuse me, that they all point to an even earlier account, unified, of the flood across the whole world. Could this early account be the biblical account passed down from thousands of years that the book of Genesis relates in the story of creation and the flood? Could it be that the book of Genesis is that source that we see in the Atrahasis tablet? So all over the world, I mentioned that the flood traditions are recounted. So in Assyria, Persia, Asia Minor, Greece, Egypt, Italy, Lithuania, Russia, China, India, Canada, the Cherokee of the United States, the Papago of Mexico, the Aztecs of Mexico, all of them have certain aspects of flood traditions in their ancient law. So that a man would be that man as a whole, mankind, did wrong, is mentioned in the Assyrian, Babylonian, Syria, Egypt, Italian, Lithuanian, Fiji Islands, and Hawaii. That divine destruction, and it carries on. So you see a lot of the parallels of the book of Genesis being paralleled throughout all these different cultures. That there would be a favored family, that an ark would be provided, that destruction by water, that the humans, certain number of them would be saved, that animals were saved, that there was universal destruction, that the ark would land on a mountain, that birds sent out, survivors worship, divine favor. All of these are spread out through these different areas throughout the world. Additionally, consider the contrast between the flood stories. In the Gilgamesh epic and the Atrahasis tablets, mankind was to be arbitrarily destroyed for simply being too bothersome to the gods. But the Genesis account gives us a much deeper reason for the flood by underlying the enormity of the sin of humanity. Sin has separated humanity from God, who is grieved and angered by their sin. We learn from this that God is a holy God who longs to have a relationship with his creation but can't tolerate sin. God seeks out Noah, desiring to restore humanity through the righteous man, echoing the earlier creation account of Genesis 2:3, chapter 2 and chapter 3, where sin is rightly condemned, yet with a solution, a promise that we see in Genesis 3:15, someone who will crush Satan's head and he will bruise his heel, the first prophecy of the death and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. So can we see the importance of why we hopefully have found some archaeological evidence that the Gilgamesh epic is not the source of the creation accounts, but it could be the Bible itself. It points to the promise and the prophecy of Christ coming. Somewhere else where we see this is in the Daniel prophecies. So the Daniel prophecies written between 615 and 539 BC were viewed as some as written much later, because they predict, they prophesy of 4 to 5 key kingdoms that will come at the time and after the time of Daniel. How could Daniel have known? Historians would say that Daniel was written way after the event and redacted back in time and history. So the book of Daniel is questioned for those reasons. Daniel prophesied 4 kingdoms, 2 of them which existed during his lifetime, that of Assyria, Babylonian, and the Medo-Persians. He referred to 2 great kingdoms that would come after: the Greeks under Alexander the Great and his 3 generals in the 3rd century, and the Romans who came to power in the 2nd century BC, the legs of iron. How could Daniel have known what was going to happen 300 or 400 years later if the book of Daniel was written between 650 and 539 BC? Skeptics have tried to find means to discredit the book of Daniel, and they believe that they found a means to discredit the book by pointing to the story of King Belshazzar, a name unknown to historians. They believe that we don't know who this Belshazzar is. It must be that the Bible is incorrect. Let's go a bit deeper. According to the Bible, Daniel was called to interpret mysterious writing on the wall at Belshazzar's feast. Belshazzar turned to Daniel and said, in Daniel, I'll get the chapter. "Now I've heard that you are able to give interpretations and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you'll be made the 3rd highest ruler in the kingdom." That's what the Bible says. Why would he be named 3rd and not 2nd? If Belshazzar is king, then Daniel should be named 2nd in the kingdom. Why 3rd? More importantly, historians know that the last king of the Babylonians was no such person as Belshazzar, because it only talks in history about Nabonidus, who was defeated by Darius the Mede, who was working under the instruction of Cyrus the Great. So who was this Belshazzar? History only knew who Nabonidus was. And they believe the Bible to be incorrect. That's why it was written so late. And when it was written so late, they believe that the Bible just made a mistake. They created a name Belshazzar, not knowing that it was Nabonidus who was supposed to be the last king of that period. But the Bible uniquely names the last king as Belshazzar. How could we defend that? To explain this, historians claimed, as I've just said, that this was written much later as a book and redacted back to the 6th century, since the Romans were in power when the author would have had historical records of all 4 empires. So yes, Daniel didn't make prophetic claims, they say. That was until a little barrel was discovered at the ziggurat of Ur earlier, and it's in the room 57 in the British Museum. So this barrel contains a prayer written in cuneiform by Nabonidus for his son Belshazzar. It is the only reference to Belshazzar proving that he existed historically. However, this artifact refers to Nabonidus being the last king of the Babylonians. How can we still align this with the Bible's claim about Belshazzar being king at the time? So yes, we found evidence for Belshazzar being a son of Nabonidus, but the Bible says that Belshazzar was in charge at the time. How could we marry the 2 up? So the Nabonidus Chronicles, to answer that, we go to another artifact, a tablet. It's a set of 2 tablets, actually. The cuneiform on the Nabonidus Chronicle tablets say that Nabonidus went to Timur in Arabia and left the ruling of his kingdom to his son for the last 10 years of his life. We found it. Nabonidus left the kingdom in charge to his son Belshazzar. The tablets don't mention the name of his son. From these 2 artifacts, we know the full history. Nabonidus was 1st in the kingdom and Belshazzar 2nd. Therefore, Daniel would have had to be 3rd, as the Bible correctly points out. Daniel, if you can interpret the words that this hand has written, you will be 3rd in the kingdom. How could someone writing in the 2nd century have known this to this detail? Things that had been forgotten by Herodotus, a historian writing around the same time. Herodotus would have access to artifacts written by Nabonidus, a senior agent. Belshazzar had no exploits to document because he was acting under his father's name, and any victory that Belshazzar won would be credited to his father, Nabonidus. But in this case, the Bible was more accurate than even the historian Herodotus, writing only 100 years later than the book of Daniel in the 6th century. He writes in the 5th century BC. And so it proves that the book of Daniel was written in the 6th century BC and not the 2nd. What does this say about the book of Daniel? For the Christian, this is exciting because the book of Daniel is full of references to the Son of Man, the Messiah, and portrays the Son of Man as a divine title. In Daniel 7, verses 13 and 14, I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and the kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages would serve him. His dominion is an everlasting kingdom, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. When the Jews heard Lord Jesus claim that he was the Son of Man, they referred this to the words of the prophecy of the book of Daniel. They knew exactly what that meant. And so in Matthew 26 and in Mark 14, they knew exactly what that meant. Only God himself could claim to have everlasting dominion over every nation, tribe, peoples, and tongues. These two artifacts that we saw, both of the barrel of Ziggurat and the Nabonidus Chronicles, not only point to the authenticity of the book of Daniel having been written 6th century BC and to have prophesied of the coming 4 kingdoms after, but also to have prophesied of our Lord Jesus Christ. These two artifacts corroborate the dating and the content of the book of Daniel, but underline the importance of the title of Son of Man. It's amazing for us to have found these. Remember, I said that even the fall of Jericho was said to be not historical compared to as it was written in the book, in the Bible, in Joshua. The Battle of Jericho is described in the Bible's book of Joshua, marked the first battle fought in the Israelites' conquest of Canaan. The battle is famous for the triumphant fall of Jericho, brought about by the going round the walls and praising 7 times in the last day. However, outside of the Bible, there is a fierce debate over whether the walls of Jericho fell in the time described by the Old Testament. You see, the Old Testament puts them as having fallen in 1400 BC. The main reason for this negative outlook is the excavations at the site carried out in the 1950s under direction of the British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon. This meticulous work, and it really is meticulous, showed that Jericho was indeed heavily fortified and that it had been burned by fire, and that the walls had fallen out, not in. When you attack a fortified city, you throw things at the walls and they fall inwards. These walls had fallen outwards, and there is evidence from her work and others that on the north wall didn't fall till much later. But she concluded that the Bronze Age city of Jericho was destroyed about 1550 BC by the Egyptians. But an in-depth analysis of the evidence reveals that the destruction took place around 1400 BC, exactly the time that the Bible puts as the conquest of Jericho. So in the Bible, Joshua 6:20, after the 7th trip around the city, the walls fell down flat. And is there evidence for that? I've said that there is. It turns out that there is ample evidence that the mud brick city wall collapsed and was deposited in the base of the stone retaining wall at the time the city met its end. Even the way that the Bible states that the walls of Jericho, see that there isn't one wall around Jericho, there was 2. If you got through one wall, you'd still have to climb up a quite steep hill to get through to the other wall. Kenyon's work was the most detailed, and she found fallen red bricks piled nearly to the top of the revetment. These probably came from the wall on the summit. Anyway, it's very clear from that work and the work of German excavation in 1907 and 1909 that they found on the north a short stretch of the lower city wall that did not fall. Could this have been the place where Ahab had her house, and she was promised that her house and her family would be kept safe? Only the northern wall, and especially where Rahab was, did the walls not fall down since the city was formed. So what amazing detail the Bible gives us, and now corroborated in archaeological finds at the city of Jericho. We're coming to our last slide, in case anyone was wondering, I'm sorry. So we've been now on a tour of the British Museum, both the ground floor and the 3rd floor. We've seen the accuracy of the Bible is unsurpassed as we looked at Shalmaneser III and his dealings with King Ahab and King Jehu, who we saw leaning and bowing down to Shalmaneser III. Tiglath-Pileser III, also known as Pul, and how the Bible described him as that, and again how that was viewed to be inaccurate and found to be more accurate. Sargon II, the one who took the northern kingdoms into captivity, as the Bible says he did, is what was found. Sennacherib and the righteous King Hezekiah, and the whole story about why he fled the first time and why he was defeated. 185,000 of his soldiers were defeated, according to the Bible, by an angel of the Lord. It's a lot of evidence points to the fact that Sennacherib went home in shame and his two sons killed him because he could give no excuse as to what happened to his 200,000 strong army. We looked at the Tharharka statue, which again was pointed out that the Bible was inaccurate, and we found this Cushite ruler who attacked Sennacherib according to the Bible. The accounts of Genesis and how they're corroborated in the Amarna, Maori, Ebla, and Newsie Tablets. We have even the names of the 5 trade cities, as we looked at earlier, in the order Sodom and Gomorrah and the remaining 5 cities in the tablets that we saw. The prophecies of the book of Daniel are backed up historically, amazingly, and point to Jesus, our Lord, being the Son of Man. Lastly, we looked at the historical corroboration of the fall of the walls of Jericho. So how amazing is our Bible that we have in our hands? It holds up to and supports archaeological findings. Dr. J. Smith, whose material this is, mentions this phrase that I loved when he used to say it continually throughout this tour. The more you scratch, the more you find. The more you find, the more we shine. The more we shine, the more they whine. Oh, how sublime. William F. Albright, a renowned archaeologist, writes that excessive skepticism shown toward the Bible by important historical schools of the 18th and 19th centuries, certain phases which still appear periodically, has been progressively discredited. Discovery after discovery has established the accuracy of innumerable details and has brought increased recognition to the value of the Bible as a source of history. Thank you. I've only touched on a few of the items that are in the British Museum that support and corroborate the Bible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ehab. It was an amazing talk. What I really like is the last part when you say, the more we scratch, the more you find. The more you find, the more we shine. It's definitely, the Bible is there, and all throughout the history, people are skeptical about a lot of, stories. But as we dig deep in history, we find more and more kind of archaeological finding that match what the Bible said, which is, it's just, mind blowing. Thank you very much, Ehab, for that. I have one comment, which you may not like, and a lot of people may not like. Okay, the Cushite are North Sudan. It is nothing to do with Ethiopia, according to the history.
So,
okay, so the Cushite is Sudan.
This supports something that you guys must know. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not a great historian. I had to study hard for this because Dr. Fairley asked me to prepare this talk, and I'm sorry for that mistake. But there are probably other mistakes there that I need to correct.
No. It's a common kind of things. People always refer to Cushite as Ethiopia and Sudan, and even because it's the word Ethiopia, it doesn't mean when it says even in the New Testament, okay, the Enoch was not Ethiopian by origin. He was Ethiopian because he has a dark skin. The word Ethiopia in Greek means dark skin, but he came from Cush because Candace, or the Kendaka in Arabic, is the queen of Cush.
She's a Nubian queen in South in
yes.
Sudan.
Okay, so anyhow, but I like the story of Daniel. Daniel story.
Wow.
There's a lot. Yeah, it's wow. It's amazing. Wow. It fits what it says at the end. The more you scratch, the more you find. The more you find, the more we shine. The more we shine, the more they whine. They whine. Oh, sublime. Oh, how sublime. It's amazing. Thank you very much. And I hope that everyone enjoy this kind of archaeological
Indiana
kind of a story.
experience. Indiana Jones experience through the
Indiana Jones experience. And I will pass on to Farah now to see if there is any question. I think there is plenty of questions for you, Ehab, to answer.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. So beautiful to see how that all aligns. We have a first question here. Thank you for a wonderful talk, which proves the Bible to be a very accurate historical book. But how does this help my faith?
I can refer to others in a sec, but my limited feeling about this is that it's really important to know that the Bible is historically accurate, that the Word of God is not just some made up set of stories put together randomly, haphazardly. It boosts my faith. If the Bible has got prophecies that are predicting a future event and that those prophecies are fulfilled, like the book of Daniel, then surely it points to the Bible being the Word of God, and that I have to then invest in knowing the Word of God for myself and building my life upon it. Dr. Anthony, would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah, it's just, I get this a lot as well. The point is this, that revelation occurs within history. It occurs within, as well within historical contexts. I think that's important because I think, I often say this to Muslims when I'm at Stratford, and say to them, look, if I say to an atheist historian, Jesus was crucified for our sins, he'll accept the first clause, but he'll reject the second one because he doesn't believe in God, so therefore he doesn't believe in sin. But the point is, if you're going to say that Jesus was crucified for our sins, you have to have the historical fact first that Jesus was crucified. And I always point out, there's no academic historian, atheist or otherwise, who will deny that Jesus was crucified. Like Ammon is an atheist, agnostic talk atheist. He says Jesus was crucified. That's very clear. You got it in Josephus, you got it, and so forth, and all the early writers. It's clearly that he was executed. So the point is that faith is based on historical events, that the intervention of God in history. So that's the whole point. It's not like Gnosticism. It's not subjective. That's why, the lecture I gave, I could have given to a group of atheists. But it proves that it's all has a solid historical basis, because we're saying that God intervened in history. And therefore, you've got to have the historical evidence for it.
Thank you, sir. And Father Michael, Father Simon, I would love to hear what you think.
I think for our faith, we believe that the Bible is, giving us identity as a Christian, as what we believe in. So imagine that someone will question your identity and they found that they are wrong. What do you think about yourself? You will question yourself and you start to say, this is not my identity. Maybe I'm something else. I'm not correct. So when we're proving by history and archaeological finding that the Bible is correct, that means that what we believe is solid, it's based on a solid ground kind of basement. You have a foundation there in the history. So no one will say to you, where is your Bible? What is your Bible correct? No, but we have a foundation. We have a solid foundation there historically. And that's my identity being proven, that I have believed in this Bible. I believe my fathers, my early fathers, who passed from me all of these information were in history. They were not imaginary characteristic. No, they are in history, they are correct.
Yeah. And Abuna Simon has also provided an answer saying, it hopefully helps to show you that your faith is based on truth, not legends or fabrications. I'll move on to the next question. Could it be possible that all the other flood stories are simply retellings of the same original flood story in Genesis, albeit slight variations based on geography, time period, and linguistics?
That's exactly, the question is from Nafali. a friend of mine, Nafali, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I was saying, that the original source would have been the Bible, the book of Genesis, and that these other retellings of the same original story in the book of Genesis have been told with their own bit of fluff, their own bit of embellishments, and these slight variations in geography throughout different parts of the world have missed bits out and added their own bits, is my opinion. But again, I'd love thoughts from the panelists that are here.
If I could say, I think even if you can't prove that they've taken it from Genesis, they would have taken it from the event itself.
Perfect.
Like that's it. That's the point, the event itself. And the point is that if you can find corroboration from as far away as Central America and China and so forth, then that does point that to the existence of some kind of global epic event. Now, how you interpret that event and so forth is a different matter. But the fact is that it's found in so many different cultures at so many different times. Rules against it being a matter of cultural diffusion. Like the argument is that for the Bible taking this story is you know, Palestine's next to Mesopotamia and so forth, the Levant, and that, you know, obviously Abraham came from Mesopotamia. But, you know, how did people, the Aztecs, get to know about it? How did people in Central America and the Cree and everything get to know about it? How did people in ancient China get to know it? There isn't the same cultural diffusion there at all. So I think it is. Can I just say can I just add one couple of things?
Yes, please.
Firstly, about the Maori and Newsie text, they also prove one of the things is that if a woman gave her handmaid to a man to produce a child, that child would be considered as hers. But if he subsequently had a child by his wife, he couldn't disinherit that child or throw him out. Now that's what makes it so different when you can stand, apart from natural feeling, why Abraham is so reluctant to do what Hagar says, cast out the bondwoman and her son.
Ooh.
It went against the culture, you see.
That's lovely.
Against all the cultural norms that he would been taught, that you just couldn't do it. It was horrific to do it. And then he has to have God say to him, no, do it. So there's that point. I think the other point is just to say that the creation stories, the cosmogonies in Mesopotamia, and even in Egypt, there's two different cosmogonies in Egypt. One involving Ptah, another one involving Atum. They're very different. Particularly Atum, involves sexual acts, you know, which we won't go into. The same thing in Mesopotamia, but it involves sexual acts and also the murder of a god and everything, and the creation coming from the god. And none of that has gone into the Old Testament, has it?
No.
So the point is, you find a very different concept there of creation. So whatever parallels you might find, you also find important differences, right? To point out that there hasn't been that cultural diffusion.
Perfect, thank you. Father Schneider, my own teacher, any thoughts, sir? Any thoughts, Abuna? I studied under Father Schneider in the clerical college of Stevenage, and wow, I learnt a lot just from being with you, Abuna. Great to see you.
Well, I mean, can you repeat again the last bit so I can get, you know?
Oh, it's just anything that you would add, or any point that you would add about the Genesis accounts, perhaps, or anything.
The Genesis account, I mean, Genesis account, as you know, I think what I'm going to do now when I'll talk about the Genesis account, but the Genesis account, all what is written in Genesis, the account, how do you take it? If you take it, you know, I mean, if you take it from the critical point of view, you can, you know, say this is not that, but we take it as an inspired word of God. And that's what, you know, we are going to talk about now, about the authentication of the Bible itself. So the book of Genesis, which is, we take it as inspired by God. And if we take the book of Genesis per se, or just the book of Genesis, when we study it as beginnings of everything. And we don't, a lot of things we don't know how did it begin, because God created. How it's happened, we don't know. And we have to get up to a point that, yes, many things will not be able to understand it and get it. and we have to accept that. It sometimes is difficult because we want to be, you know, on top of everything. I want to know everything on top of everything. Well, that's how God created it. We don't know exactly how, but we have a way, because if it is written in the book of Genesis how everything is being created, at the time it's been read 2,000-3,000 years ago, nobody will understand anything. So it put it in a very simple way for everybody to understand. Now we have all these things we are trying to say, the science and all things, is nothing contradicting, to be honest. But the point is, at the time it is written, it should suit everybody, every person in every generation. So that's I think that's how I look at Genesis in general. A lot of things in Genesis we say have been created, how this, well, that's what happened, and definitely it happened as it is written, but how, sometimes we cannot get an answer to that, and we have to accept that not every question has an answer. And I think that's how I look at Genesis personally.
Yes, thank you, Abuna. Thank you, Ehab, for a wonderful presentation, and I hope one day we'll go to the British Museum and see all this in person. We have now